You're listening to the Fierce Valley Podcast, episode 102, Hypnosis for Weight Loss and Unlocking Gender Expectations. Let's do it!
Perfect!
I'm Victoria Wellesby, TEDx speaker, best-selling author and fat activist. I have transformed my life from hating my body with desperately low self-esteem to being a courageous and confident, fierce fatty who loves every inch of this jelly. Society teaches us living in a fat body is bad, but what if we spent less time, money, and energy on the pursuit of thinness and instead focused on the things that actually matter, like if pineapple on pizza should be outlawed, or if the mullet was the greatest haircut of the 20th century. So, how do you stop negative beliefs about your fat body controlling your life? It's the Fierce Fatty Podcast. Let's begin. Hello, hi, welcome to Fierce Fatty, the podcast. Thanks for being here. Hey, tell me, riddle me this, would you? Riddle me this. How the fuck do fruit flies get into my apartment? I forgot to empty my organics bin a couple of days ago. I just realised it now. I'm gonna go empty it after the podcast. And I noticed that there were flies. It's sealed so they can't get in. Or maybe that's where they're coming from. Anyway, there's fruit flies there. And you might be like, well, obviously, duh, Victoria, they fly through the window when they smell that. They smell the banana peels or whatever. Listen up here. I'm on the 4th floor. My windows are closed. And when they are open, there's a screen. So how are they getting in? Now, my apartment is not hermetically sealed, but this seems like a mystery to me. This seems like a television show needs to be made. And then I was thinking, you know what I listen to? There's a podcast I like called This Podcast Will Kill You. It's about like science and diseases and it's really interesting. And I was thinking, oh, is it because fruit flies live on the fruit somehow? And then they're woken up by the smell of the fruit rotting from their fruit grave. And they're like these tiny... No, I don't think that's true. But that was a theory I came up with. I said, no, that's not true. So yeah, riddle me that. Tell me. Suggestions on a postcard, please. Where are these fruit flies coming from? Maybe fruit flies are like dormant, living in your house somewhere. And then they awaken when they can smell rotting fruit or the like. I don't know. Maybe this is a mystery that I'll have to go to the grave with. Very sad. Also, I thought I'd give you an update on me eating meat. I was chatting to there's a church at the end of my block that I walk past with Dougal in the morning, and often I talk to the church caretaker, who is this like rock and roll guy in his 70s, and he was giving me recommendations on places to get a bit of meat. And anyway, so I went and bought a cooked chicken, because there's no way that I'm cooking a chicken, like fuck that, no. And so I bought a cooked chicken, and I bought potatoes to make roast potatoes, and I bought Yorkshire puddings, found them, making a Sunday roast, and I just couldn't do it. I just was like, I don't want to eat the chicken. My brain was like, no, I don't want it. It's no. And I was like, come on, try a little bit. And I was like, no, I can't. And so I went and gave it to my neighbour, who was very pleased with it. He's like, oh, I'm going to make you some Polish food in return. I was like, oh, yeah. So I'm going to do it. But I've been, whenever I've been out with friends and they're eating meat, I'm like the annoying person. I was like, oh, give me a little bit. So I've tried some ham a couple of times, and then I tried a piece of chorizo. Ugh. I never liked that stuff anyway, the sausage stuff when I was a meat eater. And so I like ate it and I was like, no, I don't like that, but I like the ham. So yeah, anyway, little update there. My meat adventures. I think it's gonna take a while. But whatever. Sending out love to all the people out there who have conditions that are worsened by the colder weather if you're in the northern hemisphere. I have eczema, and whenever the cold hits, it gets way worse. I've got it on my hands, my ear canal. It's so fucking annoying. On my scalp. My scalp's been bleeding. Well, it's not been independently bleeding. It's been because I've been itching it. I need to go to the doctors to get, like, there's a scalp ointment. I need to go get that. And I know a lot of people who have arthritis. It gets really bad right now. And any others. I bet you there's other conditions too, like inflammatory conditions that probably get worse in the colder weather. So sending out love to you today, if that's you, or if you just need love in general. Here, have my love. Have my love. There you go. In your brain. That's my love. I'm giving you a virtual hug. Did you like it? Was it good? Did you like that? You feel it? So I was watching the old Netflix last night, and I watched the Rachel Dolezal documentary that came out in 2018. I watched it then too, but it's called The Rachel Divide, and I watched it again because I was like, I can't remember what that was about. Like, I remember it was about her, but I don't remember what they were saying. Anyway, so I watched it, and then I read. Then I was like, I'm really interested in this idea of transgender versus transracialism, and why transracialism shouldn't be a thing in public policy, and how comparing the two can be harmful. So I read a few articles, and one that was really good by bostonreview.net is called Why We Shouldn't Compare Transracial to Transgender Identities. Really, really interesting. I'll link to it in the show notes, facefact.com/102 for the show notes. Basically, because there's a lot of people who are like, white people, who are like, what's wrong with being transracial or identifying as transracial? And there's a lot of things. There's a lot of ways that causes harm, and this article talks about that, and it talks about the idea that the race is a social construct, gender is a social construct, and so if race and gender are social constructs, then what's the harm in just saying, I've decided to switch to a different race or whatever, and talking about the idea of when race was, quote unquote, invented. Basically, it was to make sure that white people got, land rights, and they were categorized as the people, and then everyone else were the others. And so it started out, from I remember on the top of my head, as white people, and then, because like when they did census, and then also laws that were brought into effect, white people, and then they had people, then they had slave, so they had enslaved people as if you're not white, then you're enslaved, and then they had mulatto, and then they had, and then they started bringing other things in, but white was always like, obviously that's number one, that's the top, and so before that there wasn't that categorization of race. And basically the kind of thing is, with the difference between race and gender, they're two separate things, and race and gender both are almost undefinable. Like, there's no way to say, okay, this is 100% what a woman is. There are, I can't remember what it was, genes or something, showing that someone who could appear to be a woman can have different sets of genes that say, this is a man, and different sets of genes that say, this is a woman, and different sets of genes that say, but then that person feels like a woman, presents like a woman, has what society says is female genitalia, therefore it's a woman, but then, there's other things that say, they're a man, or we don't know, or what is a man, And then with the same with race, there's no kind of one genetic thing that you can say, that person is white, or not, that person is black, etc. But so now society has said, okay, we've decided that this is what it is to be a woman, this is what it is to be a man, this is what it is to be white, black, Asian, etc. And so even though these are social constructs, it's still important to recognize them in order to recognize privilege. And one of the examples I gave is the idea of residential schools, that First Nations children, the communities the children were sent to up until 1996. So for 100 years, the children were sent to residential schools, and it was murdered, all their culture ripped from them. And in 2006, was it like 1.6 billion was set aside for reparations for those who attended a residential school. And so in that example, it's important to recognize, okay, people who have this identity, they are due reparations, versus say if someone came along and said, hey, actually I identify as being a member of this First Nations community, therefore I am due those reparations, when they're a white person and they've lived as a white person all their life, and so therefore it wouldn't be appropriate to say yes, you are due that too, because they haven't experienced that. And so the idea that race is decades and centuries of trauma piled on top of each other, and gender isn't the same. Now, of course, there's sexism, and the trauma from sexism is definitely alive and present. But most people are brought up or are birthed by a man and a woman, right? And so I am not passed down that intergenerational trauma as being born a woman, because I have a family with mixed genders, and so it's totally different. Whereas Black, Indigenous people of colour have all of those centuries of trauma, which is still informing their experiences now. It's still informing where they are in the world because of all of that history. And so that's the kind of crux of that piece. It's really interesting. Go and read it. I'm probably doing an absolute butchering all of the cool things that they were saying in there, but go and check it out. It's in the show notes. Really, really interesting. Lots of amazing points, and saying how. Sure, if someone like I should actually correct this. Rachel Dolezal changed her name to Nkechi Amare Diallo. And so I'll refer to her as Diallo from now on. So, someone like Diallo, we can't say, listen, we've taken a vote in society. We've decided we don't like you identifying as transracial. It's not cool. We can say that, but we can't force that person. We can't force someone to identify in a way that we want them to. So people are allowed to identify how they want. Now, are we going to take that and put it into public policy? Well, probably not, because the goodness that would come from doing that does not outweigh the harm that would be caused by doing that. Whereas something with transgender and recognizing transgender identities, that does not harm cis people. It only does good for transgender and cis people alike. Whereas including that transracial thing and is going to do harm to the communities that we need to not be perpetuating harm against, aka Black, Indigenous people of colour. It's only gonna. It's pretty. The people who are transracial. It's white people who are like, oh, I like the aesthetic, or I just don't feel at home being seen as white for whatever reason. And actually, Diallo, her story is a lot more complex than what we've seen before. But, you know, it's kind of interesting how it seems to be all of the stories that I've seen since, because there's other stories that have come out, all seem to be white people doing this, right? So, yeah. Yeah, so anyway, moving on. Next, if you want to, have you noticed we've got to 102 episodes and you've never heard an advert from some sponsor? Hey, maybe I should get Noom to be a sponsor. Noom. I don't want to say their name because I feel like, I know it's not true. I know it's not true that our phones are listening to us. I know how it works. There was a really interesting thing about this, you know, how we think that our phones are listening to us, but actually our adverts are based on our preferences and the preferences of people we spend time with. And so if you're spending time with loads of people who are dieters, or you, you know, go to your mum's house and she uses this certain toothpaste brand and has just bought it using a points card, so the points card is tracking what she's using, and you are at the same location where your mum is, then you might get an advert for that toothpaste. And so anyway, but still, I still feel someone Noom is listening. Anyway, so what I'm saying is we don't have any ads. I don't plan on getting any ads. And so if you want to support the show and make a donation, then a link to my PayPal will be in the show notes. If you want to keep this ad free, and you appreciate that there's no ads that you have to skip through about how you need to buy a mattress, how you need to do this bullshit diet or whatever, then you can send me a little donation over PayPal. I would appreciate it. Okay, so let's move on to what we got in today's show. We're talking about hypnosis and unlocking gender expectations. So let's start with hypnosis for quote-unquote weight loss. Because I actually had a personal experience with hypnosis that fucked me up, and I asked others their experiences, and I think it's important to talk about. We've never spoken about it. I can't believe it. After 100 episodes. Well, I've mentioned it briefly before, I think. But anyway, so hypnosis, what is it? It's kind of, people have different definitions. Let me read a little bit from Wikipedia on hypnosis. That says, hypnosis is a human condition involving focused attention, reduced peripheral awareness, and an enhanced capacity to respond to suggestion. There are competing theories explaining hypnosis and related phenomena. Altered state theories see hypnosis as an altered state of mind or trance, marked by a level of awareness different from the ordinary state of consciousness. In contrast, non-state theories see hypnosis as variously a type of placebo effect, a redefinition of an interaction with a therapist, or a form of imaginative role enactment. During hypnosis, a person is said to have heightened focus and concentration and an increased response to suggestions. Hypnosis usually begins with a hypnotic induction involving a series of preliminary instructions and suggestions. The use of hypnosis for therapeutic purposes is referred to as hypnotherapy, while its stage form is known as stage hypnosis. Hypnosis for pain management is likely to decrease acute and chronic pain in most individuals. Hypnosis-based therapies for the management of IBS and menopause is supported by evidence. Use of hypnosis for treatment of other problems has produced mixed results, such as with smoking cessation. The use of hypnosis as a form of therapy to retrieve and integrate early trauma is controversial within the scientific mainstream. Research indicates that hypnotizing an individual may aid the formation of false memories, and that hypnosis does not help people recall events more accurately. Interesting. Yeah, because there's this whole thing, the whole false memory scandal that was happening in... when was it? Like maybe it was in the 90s in America? I'm asking you like you're going to tell me. Tell me. I watched a documentary about it, about how there was some group of therapists who were doing things to retrieve memories that were locked away or hidden, and it was very controversial. And it turned out, like, strangely, that almost all their clients had been involved in like cults or extreme abuse at the hands of their caregivers, their parents, and that these memories were unlocked through this therapist, this group of therapists. And well, I say that, but it turns out a lot of it was just bullshit and was kind of suggested and coerced. And some people, even one person was taken to almost convicted of child abuse, and then the child was like, oh, actually no, the therapists implanted those memories. Anyway, off tangent. It was just really interesting. Yeah, and I'm not saying that all memories that are remembered later on. It's just this one story that I'm talking about. I don't know about this stuff enough to talk about it. It's just I found an interesting documentary. All right, so what positive psychology says in a nutshell is that hypnosis is a deep state of relaxation, focus, and increased suggestibility. Yet it is not exceptional. We regularly find ourselves lost in thought, adrift in music, and immersed in work. The difference is that during hypnotherapy, a therapist guides the client to the new mental state. While we may have seen hypnotized volunteers act like chickens on stage, their behavior results from peer pressure and compliance with authority rather than hypnotism. Hypnosis is not a means for taking over someone's mind and turning people into something that they are not. That's from positivepsychology.com. So, my experience with hypnotherapy for weight loss is that I was at the end of my dieting journey. Maybe like I had a couple of years left of trying to diet before I found fat positivity and health at every size, all that type of stuff. And so I was doing everything I could to try and become thin, and I had heard about hypnotherapy and thought, yeah, why not? I'm going to become so thin and so sexy, and it's going to be amazing. And so I Googled it. I found some clinic in Vancouver in some fancy building and met the hypnotherapists, and they seemed really happy for me to be there. And then I was taken to a room where this woman told me to lie on a couch. At this point, I'd done like lots of therapy, so I was kind of like, oh, this is exciting and fun. I wasn't anxious about it or anything. And I told her that I was addicted to food. One food in particular was really bothering me, and it was ruining my life. By the way, you can't be addicted to food. You can't be addicted to sugar. The one way that we know that we can't be addicted to sugar, there's the studies that show that the change in our brain chemicals when we eat sugar is the same as the change in our brain chemicals when we laugh or hug someone or stroke a puppy. It's just a normal reaction. And the big thing is that increased exposure to sugar means a decrease in symptoms. And with other substances that are addictive, increased exposure is not going to mean decreased symptoms. Basically, the feeling of being addicted to sugar is because we deny ourselves and then we become obsessed with it. So I was like, oh, okay, I'm addicted to this one food. I won't mention what the food is because I don't want you to have feelings about it if you eat that food. And I certainly eat that food now. Okay, so I was like, I'm just, I think about it all the time, and I just want to eat food, and, I want to eat other food, and thinking about the things I would say. I'm just like, now, oh, bless Victoria, like, you were just eating nothing. It's okay. Eat that food. And so she was like, "Oh yeah, sounds very serious. Okay, we'll do the hypnotherapy." And we had, I think maybe had like 3 sessions with her. And so what it was is you lie down and she's just talking to you. and going, oh yeah, you're just relaxed, and you're walking down some stairs, and 10, and you're feeling more relaxed, and 9, and even more relaxed. And it's basically a guided meditation. And then when she got down to like the final stair, she's like, oh, and you're so relaxed. And when I was relaxed. And also I was thinking, okay, so this is when I should be in this altered state. I thought, oh, I'm going to be, clucking like a chicken type of thing if she asked me to. But I wasn't, and I was like, oh, I'm doing it wrong. There's something wrong with me. It's not that her therapy wasn't, she didn't explain what hypnotherapy is, or if even hypnotherapy is real or whatever. And so she tested to see if I was under by moving my arm and seeing if it flopped to the floor, which it did, because I was being like, oh, I need to pretend to be hypnotized. And so she moved my arm, and I was like, oh, she probably wants it to look like she probably wants me to look relaxed. And so then I flopped it to the floor, and I was just like, oh, I feel really awkward. I don't like this. And she started talking to me about the food that I didn't want to eat, and other food too, and telling me that I should eat food that she decided is healthy for me. And what she proceeded to do was to tell me that food was disgusting, was gross. And she was like, oh, the smell of it. Oh, the taste. Oh, she was just really kind of like, oh, it's disgusting. How could you even want to eat that? I can't believe it. It makes me feel sick just thinking about it. And this is what she was saying. And I was like, oh. Obviously, I'm quote unquote under, so I was not responding. I was just lying there and being like, okay, this is going to be great. I'm not going to want to eat that food anymore. Oh my God, I'm going to be cured. And then she brought me out of hypnosis, brought me, going up the stairs again. I want to say brought me out of hypnosis. Basically was just talking to me and saying, oh, okay, you can open your eyes now. And so I went back, I think, a couple more times. And afterwards, I was telling everyone I was cured from my food addiction and my addiction to this one food. I remember going to visit my sister-in-law and suggesting that the whole family go for a run. What a fucking dick I was. Ugh. And because they weren't the running type of family, they weren't runners, right? That wasn't a part of what we did. And because I was so fit and healthy now. And so I was like, okay, let's go for a 5K run. And they were like, okay, because I wanted to be nice. They wanted to be nice to me. I remember really clearly walking next to my sister-in-law, because we were doing a little bit of a walk break. And when I say sister-in-law, I was with my partner for like 6 years, and so not really, but saying, oh my God, you should try this hypnotism thing. I'm totally cured from being addicted to XYZ. I don't even think about it anymore. Oh my God. And so I was influenced, but what was influencing me was shame, deep shame. Because this woman really, really, I just remember her words so clearly and afterwards she repeated when I was awake, quote unquote, awake. I remember seeing her face and being like, oh, it's disgusting. A disgust, look on her face. And so why would I be then eating that food that I've been told is just absolutely vile and repulsive, that I would even eat that thing? And I wanted it to work, because I'd been spent my whole life trying to become thin and get control over my eating. And, eventually I, kind of carried on with life, and then eventually discovered health at every size and all that type of stuff. So I lost money there. And the thing is, even now, probably 10 years later, the smell of that food is triggering for me. It triggers in me feelings of shame. And now that shame comes up, and immediately I know what to do. I talk to myself, and I'm like, is this your shame to hold? Is this just the really, absolutely unethical shit that you heard from this person who was telling you that it's repulsive and disgusting and all that type of stuff? Is that true? Should you be eating this? Yes, I should is the answer. Yes, I should be eating this thing. And so I still, now it's like this thought that comes up when I smell it. Shame. And, when I have it at home, needing to open my windows to remove this. And it's not a smelly thing. It's just food. And because there's this shame that comes up. So still years later, I'm working to recover from these 3 sessions that I had like a decade ago. So anyway, I want to share a story from one of my followers on Instagram, Melissa, who says, because I put a story up saying, has anyone been hypnotized for quote unquote weight loss? Melissa says, this was maybe 2009 or so. I was at my heaviest and desperate for anything that would help or be easy. My mum got hypnosis to help her quit smoking, so I thought maybe it would work. Mind, I had already paid money for subliminal message CDs to help with this. Newsflash, didn't help. I was so naive. I used to think if something was advertised as being sold, it had to be true. I can't tell you how much money I have spent in the pursuit of thinness. Anyway, I can't remember how I found this guy. Maybe Google? I'm not sure. We talked for a bit, and I'm sure he could see I was a sucker. He made audio files for me to listen to. They didn't work. I was so excited to do this because, like everything else in my life, I swore this would be the answer to all my problems, a quick fix. It was awkward. Something about him felt predatory, but I forced myself to do it because I wanted results. I really thought he would say some magic words that would flip a switch in my head, but it was just like affirmations, really. I cannot fathom how you could charge $900 for affirmations. I have paid for people to hypnotize me twice in my life, both times virtually, and both times I never felt hypnotized. Anyway, I remember looking him up later to see he was a magician by trade. Yikes, Jesus Christ. Anyone can make money off someone who's desperate. Wow, wow, wow. This is what I said. Wow, wow, wow. Thanks so much for sharing. I paid to be hypnotized too. And anyway, so Melissa continues. I've always had shame around food since I was a kid. It actually gave me shame for being a sucker and being duped out of so much money. I could tell you many stories. My whole life has been shame and trying to be skinny. And I said, no need to feel shame for being duped. I was too, and it was just excellent marketing and a vulnerable brain filled with fatphobia that made me susceptible. Yeah. And I haven't said this, but I'm going to say this in a second. Let me just move on. So Melissa, that's a really important story there. I'm really surprised. You know, that virtual thing that they just send you some tapes. Like, I'm just surprised that that's all they think that they need to do. You know. So, Lauren, who is Feel Good Dietitian. I work with Lauren and I do coaching in Lauren's program. Lauren will help you with finding peace around food and learning intuitive eating. And I come in and do like a guest Q&A for Lauren. Lauren's awesome. And Lauren said that she was creeped out by this man in the room when she was doing the hypnotism. And she said, I think I only went like twice, maybe 3 times. Basically, he sent me some recording to listen to on my own. I didn't think it did anything. It was honestly more to help me stop thinking about food all the time versus lose weight. I wasted a ton of money. Nonetheless, it just did nothing But she didn't feel any more messed up with food than I already was. So luckily, Lauren didn't get negative side effects apart from losing money, and probably, I'm guessing, probably felt the same as Melissa did. Maybe kind of disappointed or embarrassed that it didn't work for them. So what is happening? Does this work? Is it just, here's 3 stories, me, Lauren, and Melissa, and we're just 3 losers, and it works for other people because, you know, someone's grandma, sister's dog's friend's parrot went to get hypnosis and they lost £5,000. And so if it worked for them, why didn't it work for us? So let's look at the science. Now, there's an article here from Time called "Is a Hypnosis Real?" I'm going to link it. Don't bother reading it; it's boring. But here's a segment. In terms of weight loss, some of this guy's Kirsch's research has found that compared to people undergoing cognitive behavioral therapy (CBT) for one of the most evidence-backed non-drug treatments for weight loss, is it? Hang on a minute. They're saying in Time that CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, is the most evidence-backed non-drug treatment for weight loss. Well, I mean, it could be the most evidence-backed, but the evidence still is that diets don't work no matter how. Intentional weight loss, I should say, intentional weight loss doesn't work no matter how. So anyway, so CBD is the most evidence-backed non-drug treatment for weight loss, depression, and many other conditions. Those who undergo CBT coupled with hypnosis tend to lose significantly more weight, is what this guy is saying. After 4 to 6 months, those undergoing CBT hypnosis dropped more than X pounds, while those who did just CBT, lost about half that amount. The hypnosis group also maintained that weight loss during an 18-month follow-up period, while the CBT-only group tended to regain some weight. Hey, notice something. I want you to see if the alarm bells are ringing on one thing in there. Well, lots of things, but one main thing that tells us, is this information, are these studies that this Kirsch has looked at, is it showing that CBT plus hypnosis makes people thin or lose weight? Oh, on the surface, it's saying that yes, people do it, they lose weight, and they followed up after 18 months. Interesting. Where's the follow-up at month 19 or 20 or 2 years or 3 years or 5 years? What we know is that if they did follow up at year 3, 4, and 5, those numbers are going to be saying probably, because the evidence shows that with any intentional weight loss that people would have put on either more weight than they started with or regained their weight. Most people, right? But it's like, oh, we did a bit of hypnosis. They initially lost weight and it was great. And then we followed up like 18 months later and they were still thin. Oh, what about 2 years? Forget about that. Don't worry about that. What about 3? What about 5? What happened to these people after 5 years? Are they still thin? Or are they fucked up by your hypnosis and your whatever diet it is that you prescribed? I don't know. So looking at this, okay, so there's a study that is called Hypnotherapy for O-word patients, a narrative review. And let me just read the first bit here. First off, they start by saying that fat people are taking over the world and they need to die. And then they say, the search identified 119 articles, of which 7 met the inclusion criteria. A total of 539 respondents, 82% women, 17% men, between the ages of 17 and 67. Oh, imagine being 67 and still doing this bullshit. were represented in the 7 studies. Most studies incorporated lifestyle changes such as change of dietary habit and behavioral recommendations in the hypnotic procedure. So it sounds like, okay, in the hypnotic procedure, they are saying you need to incorporate lifestyle changes such as change in diets, habit. And so it sounds like they're probably doing something like what I experience. I think my version, that sounds pretty extreme, like my version that the hypnotherapist was like, it's disgusting. I don't know if that's the protocol. But even if it is just like, oh, you love celery. Oh, you're really drawn to eating dust. Oh, you know, even if it's stuff like that, like positive, I'm saying with a like, you know, positive. What is that going to do when they are not drawn to celery and dust? Let me guess. It's gonna make people feel ashamed. Okay, continuing. The results suggested that the use of hypnotherapy not only promoted weight reduction during the treatment period, but also after a treatment cessation. And in some cases, a X amount of kilos were lost during follow-up periods. Don't know when the follow-up periods were. In addition, one study even showed increased physical activity among the hypnotized individuals. Again, I reckon it was probably like, oh, you love running, and the person is, you know, doing the fake, being fake, you know, oh, I'm hypnotized, oh, I better go out for a run because if I didn't, then I wasted $500 on this bullshit. The use of hypnotherapy also improved respondents' eating behavior and quality of life. However, a definitive conclusion could not be drawn due to several methodological flaws and the limited number of published studies in this area. Therefore, further well-designed studies are needed to substantiate the effectiveness of hypnotherapy. It's like, you know, they're saying some people did this, some people did that, but actually we don't have this, we can't draw any conclusions because we don't have enough information, and all of the information is not, that we do have, is not, has flaws. So there's not evidence to show hypnotherapy is going to make someone lose weight long term. I would love to know, this would be really interesting to see the effects, because we know like the effects that diets have, like diets is the number one risk factor for eating disorder. And all sorts of different things happen with when someone is engaging in diets, restrictive behavior around food, all that type of stuff, has a negative effect on their physical and emotional well-being. I wonder if that's worse with hypnotherapy, or the same, or not as bad. I wonder, because it looks like there's information on hypnotherapy for, like in, you know, the first off when I was reading about what hypnotherapy is. There are studies to suggest that hypnotherapy is good for pain reduction, for anxiety, maybe for PTSD. Not always for any of those things. And I mean, they're not going to be swapping out anesthetizing people for hypnotizing them instead, you know, like they're not going to be like, okay, you've come in for your knee replacement today, Doris, we're going to just do some hypnotizing and you're not going to feel anything, you know. They were going to be like, they might be like, hey Doris, think about a nice walk on the beach as they're putting her under, right? That's what they did last time when I had surgery last. The anesthesiologist was like, oh, imagine you're sitting on the beach and it's nice and warm, and I'm just going to give you a glass of wine right now, and then they give you a little bit of the anesthesia, and then you're like, oh fuck yeah. And she was like whispering really nice things to me. She was like, I can't remember what it was, but it was like, you're safe and you're so relaxed and you feel so good. And I was like, oh, bitch, you were really doing it. You got your 5 minutes of fame right now, telling me all these things. Like, anesthesiologists have only got like a really short time with a patient and she's making it work. She's leaving me with an excellent impression. I was like 5 stars for that anesthesiologist. She made my 10 seconds of counting back until 0 really fucking nice. So I think like hypnotism can be helpful alongside, for some patients, alongside other treatments, because really what it is meditation. And there's meditation can be very, very helpful because your breathing is slowed and your heart rate is slowed, and with this that increased concentration. To me, it feels like, I don't know if you ever get this, but my sister always comments that I do this. When you get a stare on. Do you ever get a stare on? When you space out and you're just looking at something, and she says that I look absolutely weird as fuck because my eyes go really weird and I'm just like, got a good stare on, and you just like zone out. Is this a I think you know what I'm talking about. Do you get this? Just a good stare on. And if someone did come into your vision during that time, they'll be like, what the fuck is this person's problem? Why are they giving me the stink eye? But you don't recognize it because you've just got a stare on. And it lasts like, I don't know, 15 seconds. And then you're like, oh, I had a good stare on, didn't I? That was a nice stare on. And it's satisfying, you know. And I kind of feel like that is what hypnotism is. Having a bit of a stare on, but then like with your mind, and then like a bit of a relaxation. I mean, and it would be nice. Imagine if I went to hypnotism and it wasn't about weight loss. It was about like, hey, you're just going to relax. That would be cool because, you know, walking down the stairs and we're on a beach. And I remember it because that was relaxing. Apart from the performance pressure of being like, I'm going to have to convince this bitch that I'm fucking, you know, going to start running around the room because if she suggests it, I'm so hypnotized. So I think, you know, it can be helpful, but I think I'd take it with a pinch of salt. I'd love to know what people are. I could just Google it, I guess, but just speak to someone who's been on stage, you know, and they do the hypnotism, because what a lot of people are saying is that it's peer pressure. I can so see that. I can so see people. I mean, I did, you know, the peer pressure of being like on my arms flopping down. I would absolutely fall for peer pressure in that circumstance. I went to see a hypnotism show actually when I was at Leeds and Reading Music Festival, Leeds or Reading, I can't remember which one. I went to both when I was like 17, and it was so fucking funny. It was so funny. Oh, it's one of the best things about this music festival was this hypnotism show. Anyway, so I don't know what I was talking about, but my mind got on a sidetrack there. I didn't have a stare on. My brain had a bit of a stare on. So let's do a roundup of what we've talked about. Is hypnotherapy a weight loss hack? So when I was in my final years of dieting, I was trying to do anything to get thin. And I came to the conclusion that I was addicted to food. And so I was going to try hypnotherapy as a way to stop my desire to eat quote unquote bad foods that I decided were bad. And hypnotism isn't what we see on TV. The hypnotist doesn't click their fingers and then you have control of your mind and you start doing stupid shit like, you know, pretending to be a chicken and all that type of stuff. Instead, it's kind of like a guided meditation. And the stuff that we see on stage, a lot of that is peer pressure. So in my experience, in the meditation bit, the hypnotist, I say the meditation bit, the bit where I was hypnotized, I wasn't hypnotized, I was just lying on the couch pretending to be hypnotized. The hypnotist told me that the foods that I craved were disgusting and repulsive and gross. in order for me to feel shame around those foods so I would stop eating them. And after I did, I avoided the food that I was told was repulsive and disgusting and gross, and the smell of it was horrible and all that type of stuff. Now I know why I did that, is that my already deep shame had been rocket blasted into space, and now I felt shame and repulsion toward myself for wanting that food and eventually eating the food, because you can only hold your breath, so to speak, metaphorically, around food for a certain amount of time, and then you have to give in and allow yourself those foods. And so studies have shown that people who try hypnotism for weight loss lose weight initially, and then ... What do we think that happens? We have no idea what happens, because the data doesn't show long term what happens to those people. But we can presume, as with any intentional weight loss method, that the people gain the weight back and more for a lot of people, because our bodies and brains rebel against the restriction. And it's no fault of our own. It's not that we failed at being a good hypnotized person or didn't do the diet well enough or whatever. It's out of our control. So I wonder how much impact this method of weight loss has on the well-being of participants. For me, now, even after years and years, smelling the food that I was hypnotized, quote unquote, to not eat, still brings up feelings of shame. I'm able to cope with those feelings of shame, but it's really fucking annoying. It doesn't stop me from eating the food, but it's just a barrier that I have to face when I come in contact with this food, which is a common food, which is just eye roll, so annoying. So having to wrestle with those unwanted feelings, and I only had 2 or 3 sessions, right? And so I wonder what hypnotism is doing to people who go in for weight loss, whether it's just that they lose tons of money, or there are longer term effects of that shame that the hypnotherapist told them that they need to feel around these foods, or even just the encouragement to do certain things, you know, and how that has a negative effect, because again, it's shame. And one thing that we know about shame is that shame increases people's weight. Not that having a higher weight is a bad thing, but it's doing the opposite, that, you know, the opposite effect that is intended when it comes to hypnosis. So let's talk about gender. I wrote a post and people seem to resonate with it, so I wanted to share. With you because you're so important. I want to tell you things, okay? So gender. Okay, so I'm non-binary, in case you didn't know. You're like, yeah, I know, God, but, you know, we might have a new listener today. We might have a new listener. Hello, new listener, if you're a new listener. Hi, I'm Victoria. And that reminds me, I need to change the synopsis for the podcast refers to me as she, and I every time I see it, I'm like, I need to change that, and then 30 seconds later, I'm like, oh, I'm going to scratch my bum. I put a picture of myself up on the Instagrams. It's just a picture of me looking fabulous. Not just, it's a picture of me looking fabulous. And I wrote, this is what a non-binary person looks like. We all look different. There is no one way to be non-binary. Being non-binary is a way you experience your own gender. For me, unlearning fatphobia and diet culture helped me understand how I was living by a very gendered definition of who I should be. Because I was fat, I needed to make up for or compensate for my ugly body by being hyper feminine. The way I perceived being quote unquote feminine was having long hair and high heels and wearing skirts. There is nothing wrong with any of those things, and those things are not inherently feminine, by the way. Also, I would act like I was less intelligent or that I was weak so that cis men felt more comfortable in my presence. I would hope they'd think Oh, she may be fat, but at least I'm stronger than her. I would do these things in order for cis men to be more attracted to me. Once I unlearned fatphobia, I started looking at what I actually liked, who I am underneath all of these rules society and myself had put on my existence. Turns out being feminine is not something I want to do for cis men. Some days I can feel more feminine. I'm putting feminine in quotation marks because what even is feminine? You know, it's made up. And so some days I can feel more feminine and do things like wear lipstick. Again, not something that is inherently feminine, but society can perceive it as feminine. Some days I feel like I want to be more masc and want to wear sweatpants and a baseball cap. The idea of people perceiving me as a woman makes me feel yuck because that is not who I feel inside. I don't know if I would have ever got to this point if it wasn't for unlearning fatphobia. If I still hated my fat body, I would still be so concerned about putting on a show for cis men so that they could consume my body, so that I was more palatable for them. It is so liberating to be free of those confines. I feel like I am allowed to be fully myself as a non-binary person. I still struggle with the idea of being seen by cis men and wanting to convey a message to them. But I know ultimately putting on an act to be loved by someone else isn't going to benefit me or them. Question: have you ever performed with gender for others in order to compensate for your body size? So we had a lot of people. Let me go to the comments. People say, yeah, oh my God. Oh my God, oh my God. I feel like a lot of people do this, even if they don't, even if they're not talking about, they're not having feelings around gender. They are, even if they are, cis and, there's no kind of questions around their gender. I feel like a lot of people play up certain aspects of gender depending on what your gender is, so that we're conveying a message to people we want to attract. That I'm even though I'm fat, like I'm not, even though I'm fat, I'm dainty, and even though, like, say if you're a guy, even though I'm short, I'm still strong, and even though I'm this, I'm that, even though, trying to make up for this perceived flaw, even though it's, it's not a flaw. So one comment I'm just going to read. As a tall plus-size woman, this deeply resonates. I always felt my large frame made me more masculine looking, and part of my way of performing femininity was trying to make my body as little as possible. This was 1, not healthy in any way. 2, not possible after a point because my body stopped responding to what I was doing to make it smaller. The more I love myself as I am and learn what makes me feel beautiful and sexy, the less confined I feel to looking a certain way for men I may want to attract, or people who could judge me. And the men who I should want to attract should love me for me anyways, not a highly filtered version of me. Yeah. I'm going to read another comment. This resonates so much. Off the top of my head, once I was old enough to get contacts, I felt like I always had to wear them because it was bad enough I was fat. I couldn't wear glasses on top of that. Although, to be fair, Dorothy Parker's "men don't make passes at girls who wear glasses" impacted this opinion too. I don't know what that is. I think that might be a North American thing. Or maybe it's, I don't know, whatever. But I'm guessing it's an advert for contact lenses, maybe? I don't know. Anyway, continuing. I also felt like I needed to wear my hair down and straighten it, even though I hated straightening my hair because it's so thick, it took forever to straighten. Yeah, that's one thing. It's so funny. Like, sometimes we perceive certain things, like this person saying, oh, I had to not wear glasses. I perceived glasses as something that was cute and interesting and sexy. I didn't get any negative messaging around it. I guess I did a little bit, like my mum had glasses and they, like negative messaging as in it was difficult to not see, but because it is, but I didn't have any kind of like, I guess, I'll tell you what though, when I first got glasses, I got the coolest fucking pair. Oh my God. They were cool for like 3 minutes and then I was like, I hate them. I got a pair of Ghostbusters glasses. So cool. I think I was in primary school, so I must have been about 8. And they were like wire-framed, round, and they had the wireframe on the arm. They had a Ghostbusters symbol. My God, how fucking cool! I've got a picture of me wearing them in a end of year photo. I looked like so fucking cute. And then someone I think was like, Ghostbusters, and I was like, oh, they're not cute, they're not cool. I don't want to wear them anymore. And then I didn't really need glasses until I was in my late 20s, and late teens. And so, so I didn't probably get glasses until I was like 18 or 19 for real, that I had to wear them pretty much often. And so I probably had a more secure sense of my identity a little bit, and thought that they looked cute and sexy versus them being unattractive. Whereas, because that's just the message I got. Whereas this person got the opposite. And so I can't wear the glasses. But who's right? It's just glasses, And I guess some people have strong feelings either way. Like I don't really care if someone has glasses or doesn't have glasses. I think people look cute either way. They look handsome and pretty and good and whatever. So it doesn't make any difference to me, but it's kind of funny because I always think about, the foods that some people think are bad. Because, we all think, we all have this universal idea of what is good and bad foods, right? We all know what the good foods are. We all know what the bad foods are. But I think that's true to an extent, but not always, because I think sometimes we're really influenced by certain foods and think, they're really bad. And whereas someone who has not had the messaging that they're bad, they just see them as a neutral food or a healthy food or, just a food. I guess it's just, someone who's not been fucked up around food. And so sometimes when I hear people saying, this food is really bad, and I'm like, is it? Like, as in they had been taught that food was bad, but I had been taught something else was bad. And they might be like, I don't even think about that food. It's not even a thing in my brain, whatever. I'll just eat it, no big deal. And all these perceptions that we have around all sorts of different things. Anyway, and so with gender, that performing, especially because I'm not very tall. I'm 5'7", probably 5'7.5". I've got size 10 feet in the UK, in the US, size 8 in the UK, which is close to the largest that you can get in stores. And they're wide too. And so I was like, oh my God, I've got big feet. And so how in the, 2009s, it was cool to take pictures of all of your friends' feet in a circle. Do you remember that? And I was always like so embarrassed because my best friend, she had size 3 feet. So what is that in Canada? It's size 5. So the smallest, so I had the biggest in general stores. She had the smallest in general stores, and we'd always compare feet sizes. And she'd always be like, oh, my feet are so small. And I'd be like, oh my God, yeah, your feet are so small. And I'd always be thinking, oh God, my feet are so big. If guys see my feet are so big, plus I'm fat, plus I'm 5'7", and my friend was short too. She was like 5 foot or something. So compared to her, like pictures next to her, I just felt like a boost, like a total beast. And so I did one episode where I said the things that I used to do to make myself small. And one of them would be using a teaspoon to like eat cereal. Because I'd be like, I couldn't possibly manage a tablespoon. Oh, that's so big because my mouth is so tiny because I'm so small. Literally, I would never order a large glass of, say if I went to the pub, I wouldn't order a pint of beer. I would be like, oh no, I'll have a cocktail. Because I want to people to be like, oh, she's so feminine. Oh my God. Oh my God, is she fat? No, she's not fat. She's drinking a Cosmopolitan. She can't be fat because she's so dainty and feminine and womanly. She's drinking a Cosmo because she's been watching so much Sex and the City. So And that extended to obviously doing things that I didn't want to eat with a fucking teaspoon. I wanted to eat with a ladle, you know, like everyone else. I wanted to have a drink that I liked, not a drink that, you know, made me look a certain way. And who fucking cares? Who fucking cares? And really, it's a lot of this is down to a lot of cis men not feeling good about themselves, and them not feeling big enough, them not feeling manly enough or masculine enough or XYZ. And so them having a low self-esteem and being like, oh, well, I need my partner to be small because then it will make me feel bigger. And yeah, it's a lot of it. It's just down to all of us are walking around being like, I want to be loved and accepted, and I don't feel like I'm good enough. And we are good enough. We're all good enough. Oh. All right. Okay. So thank you for hanging out with me today. Oh my God, I've gone to 1 hour and 5. Oh my God. I was like, oh, today's episode is going to be short. I always say that, don't I? In my brain, I was like, oh, today's episode is going to be like 20 minutes. Listen, I know a lot of people make short episodes. A lot of people make podcast episodes that are like 20 minutes, 30 minutes. I personally like longer episodes, okay? Because I tell you why I like longer episodes. It's because I want to have a big buffer to fall asleep to. You know? Do you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? You know when you put a podcast on, if you listen to me falling asleep, good night, fall asleep. If you listen to me falling asleep, you can't guarantee that you're going to fall asleep in, say if the episode's like 27 minutes. It's not even half an hour, so you can't put the half an hour timer on. Thanks for ruining my life, podcast producer. God. And so then you have to put on like 15-minute timer, or if you're using a different app, you can customize it a little bit more. But if you're using like an Apple, whatever. Anyway, and so then you're like, I've got pressure to fall asleep in 15 minutes because this motherfucker has made a 27-minute podcast episode. And you know what's going to happen then? You're not going to fall asleep in 15 minutes. 15 minutes comes, podcast episode stops, and you're going to be like, you're not quite asleep, but you know you need a little bit more bedtime stories. So you have to open your eyes and look at that bright screen to press play again and do an, you know, am I going to then listen to 10 minutes because it's a 27-minute episode, but then I've got pressure to fall asleep in the next 10 minutes. Whereas, you know what just feels really safe and comfortable for me is when I go on podcast episode. When I say go on, when I look at a podcast episode and it's like an hour and 47, I'm like, oh yeah, fucking hour and 47. Then I put the timer on for 45 minutes. And then I know that if I wake up and there's no podcast playing, or it's 45 minutes and I haven't fallen asleep yet, I still got like an hour left of podcast to still listen to. And so I'm like, it's another hour. You're going to fall asleep in an hour. See, I think about these things. That's why I make my podcast episodes long, so that you can fall asleep and then know that I'm still going to be yapping away in an hour's time, so you don't feel pressure to fall asleep. Basically, I'm making your life better. Basically, I am probably the best person that's ever lived. Probably. No doubt about it. Oh my God. Oh, the work I'm doing with humanity. Oh, amazing. So that's why my episodes are so long, because I'm like basically Mother Teresa right there. Yeah, you're welcome. I know. Okay, well, if you are asleep listening to this, enjoy your sleep. And if you're like driving a car or whatever and you're like, I'm not sleepy, Victoria, stop trying to make me sleepy, then go on off and have a wonderful rest of your day. And I'll see you in the next episode. See you in a while, alligator. Bye. Stay fierce, fatty. Thanks for listening to the episode. And if you feel ready to get serious about this work and want to know when the doors open to Fierce Fatty Academy, which is my signature program where I teach all about how to overcome your fatphobic beliefs and learn to love your fat body, then go to fiercefatty.com/ waitlist. Again, that is fiercefatty.com/waitlist to get your name on the waitlist for when Fierce Fatty Academy, my signature program, opens.